2016 is a historic year for many reasons, but the most important one is nowhere to be seen in the media headlines. This is the year that the baby boomers, the biggest generation that ever lived, hits the big 7-0. From 2016 to 2034, one of the biggest megatrends in history reaches its climax. The baby boomers, born after the Second World War from 1946 to 1964, start hitting 70 in their droves. In America, 10,000 people a day will turn 70 years of age every day for the next 18 years. In Britain, it'll be about 2,000 a day. Fortunes will be made by investors who understand the implications of this trend and position their portfolios to maximize the opportunity. And fortunes will be lost by those who think everything will just carry on like it always has. I'll never forget Harry Dent's definition of the baby boomer generation as a pig moving through a python. Look back over the last 7 decades and you can see what he means. In the 1950s, the boom was in baby food to nourish all these ankle biters that suddenly appeared when the troops came home from the war. I guess birth control wasn't quite so advanced in those days. Move into the 1960s and the baby boomers become teenagers, driving the massive sales of records as pop music becomes their greatest interest. Artists today would find it incredible that in the mid-60s you'd need to sell 500,000 records to get into the top 10. Today, a few thousand downloads will make you a megastar. Move into the decade that style forgot, the 1970s, and we were all buying second-hand cars. I invested 75 quid in a Hillman Minx with more plastic padding than metal in the wings, but it got me all around the country and it never let me down. Of course, all this newfound spending power brought massive inflation, with interest rates rising into the teens as we moved into the 1980s. We all wanted to buy our first home now, so we piled into the mortgages at interest rates that would make millennials' eyes water. My first mortgage was 13.5%, and I thought I'd never survive the monthly payments. After all, I'd had to pay £16,500 for a brand new 3-bedroom semi-detached. We all moved up to larger family homes and cars as our careers blossomed in the 90s, while the smart ones started putting money into pensions and PEPs, the first form of what we now call ISAs. By the turn of the millennium, the first boomers were in their mid-50s and starting to turn their minds to semi-retirement. A spate of corporate downsizing led many to take redundancy and early retirement packages where they moved into part-time consultancy roles. And now in this decade, we see increasing divisions between the haves and the have-nots of the boomer generation. The guy who didn't bother putting anything to a pension is now a checkout operator at Sainsburys. The ones who rode the biggest property and stock market booms in history are sitting pretty with high-value properties and 6-figure portfolios of stocks and shares. But what happens next, and what does it mean for savvy investors? The answer is this huge population group starts moving from wealth accumulation to the liquidation of assets. They want to downsize the family home and move to an apartment or even a bungalow. They start drawing down their pension or ISA investments to meet unexpected bills. Their earnings drop to 60% of the peak they reached when they were 50. Medical expenses triple between 70 and 80. And those that can afford to will pay to go private so they can jump the NHS queues. For the economy as a whole, the boomers move from being inflationary teenagers in the 1960s and 70s to deflationary pensioners in the 21st century. But what happens when 2,000 people a day for 18 years decide to downsize the family home? Even if we assume that 2 boomers share the same home, that's 350,000 family homes coming onto the market every year at a time when the next generation is smaller than the one before. What will that do to residential property prices? On the other hand, how can we build enough care homes to look after 700,000 new septuagenarians every year for the next 18 years? It will literally be impossible to find the space, get the planning permission, fund the building, or find the staff to run all these homes. So do you think this commercial property-based opportunity is a trend worth investing into? Me too. That's why you'll see dementia care homes in the elite investor portfolio, offering great returns for up to 25 years. Taking it a stage further, many of these boomers live in London, and when they finally shuttle off their mortal coil, their families will find an acute shortage of burial space. That's why you'll find London burial plots in our portfolio, giving 40% returns in 2 years. As the boomers age, medical and healthcare services will also boom, especially those aimed at the wealthier retirees who can afford private care. Specialised residential facilities with some degree of medical support will boom. Luxury cruisers will also boom, but traditional family property prices will probably tank as they all downsize, while car sales have probably also peaked already. This is one of the biggest mega trends of the coming decades. Focus on this alone and you could set yourself and your loved ones up financially for generations to come. The vast number of people who've come to rely on the government rather than their own efforts will struggle to cope with this new reality.